Our scripture this morning comes from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus is talking to his disciples. Jesus warned them to keep quiet, not to breathe a word of it to anyone. He then began explaining things to them. It is necessary that the Son of Man proceed to an ordeal of suffering, be tried and found guilty by the elders, high priests, and religious scholars, be killed, and after 3 days rise up alive. He said this simply and clearly so they couldn't miss it. But Peter grabbed him in protest. Turning and seeing his disciples wavering, wondering what to believe, Jesus confronted Peter. Peter, get out of my way. Satan, get lost. You have no idea how God works. Calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, anyone who intends to come with me has to let me lead. You're not in the driver's seat. I am. Don't run from suffering. Embrace it. Follow me and I'll show you how. Self-help is no help at all. Self-sacrifice is my way. Or is the way, my way, to saving yourself, your true self. What good would it do to get everything you want and lose you, the real you? What could you ever trade your soul for? If any of you are embarrassed over me and the way I'm leading you when you get around your fickle and unfocused friends, know that you'll be an even greater embarrassment to the Son of Man when he arrives in all the splendor of God, his Father, with an army of the holy angels. The Holy Scriptures. Let the Spirit add to our understanding of it. So, I stand up here a lot, and I tell you how sometimes I think we can lead better lives, how better we can reconnect with God. So I thought, before I started this morning, I'd tell you how that worked a little bit in my life recently. I don't know if you know it or not, but sometimes as a pastor, it's hard to make time, extra time for just myself to be with God, to make personal devotion time. It's kind of like work. If you're at work and you're kind of studying stuff a lot, you don't want to go home and do work. Even though it's vital that I do find time to be alone with God. So in the past, it's usually a hodgepodge of things. Every once in a while, I'll find time to do a little personal Bible study or prayer time. But it was hard for me to carve out a time to do it consistently every day. Well, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago, maybe I decided I'm going to make it time. Every morning I'm going to get up at 6:15 and spend half an hour just doing a quick little Bible study and just talking to God. So I've done that for maybe about 3 weeks consistently now, and I found something interesting. I have found that I don't feel as out of control, I suppose, almost like you're running through life and not knowing where to stop. It's hard to explain, but you probably know the feeling where you're just bouncing from one thing to one thing. You're worried about when the next thing comes up. You don't know if you're going to make it to everything. You just kind of feel hurried and rushed. And as I was looking back, I committed to those 3 weeks. Nothing has miraculously happened. But I have noticed that I don't feel so out of control. I don't wake up on Monday morning thinking, holy smokes, all the stuff I got to get done by Friday. Now, have things really slowed down? Have commitments really stopped or lessened? Not really. But I have found that through the connection, I don't feel quite as out of control. I simply say that to give us an example of what can happen if we do commit to spending time with God. That sometimes I do practice what I preach. Today is another one of those examples. We get a pretty familiar story. This is in Mark. It's also in the other 3 synoptic gospels. It's right after Jesus says that Peter tells Jesus, the disciples tell Jesus that you are the Messiah. And then it follows with him saying, all right, now don't tell anybody because there's some other things you need to learn first. And then following that is the transfiguration. It's the steps that happen in all 3 of the gospels. But we're used to hearing the stories of Jesus of his suffering and his trial and his arrest and his death on the cross. And we know the end, right? We know finally at Easter that he is resurrected, he's alive, he wins. So we kind of hear these stories and, yeah, that's nice. You're just talking about his suffering. We miss the impact that would have had on his disciples. They are with him. They see his miracles. They experience his magnetic personality. They see the enthusiastic crowds that he has drawn, and it's natural for them to assume that he's going to be the Messiah that leads them to drive out the Romans. They would see that he is going to be the one that is going to lead Israel back to its glory as a kingdom. So then they hear this for the first time. When Jesus says, wait a minute, I need to suffer, I need to be arrested, I need to suffer, I need to die. And they don't even hear the last part. It talks about I'll become alive again. It's almost the worst possible thing they could have heard, because all their hopes and dreams of the Messiah, he's basically telling them, are not going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't understand it. He responds, of course, Peter responds, of course, saying, you're kidding us. You're wrong. That's not the way it's going to work. Peter, of course, being willing to open his mouth, says what everyone's thinking. You're wrong, Jesus. That's not how it's going to work. Then Jesus rebukes him. He says, get behind me, Satan. And he goes on to say, this is the way life is going to be if you follow me. It's kind of what we probably would have thought if we were with that first disciples. That's not what I want, Jesus. His talk about denying yourself, taking up your cross, saving your life, or losing your life if you want to save it, is so contrary to what the disciples believe in the Messiah that he repeats it twice more in Mark. He's beginning to help them understand that my thoughts are not your thoughts. Your ways are not my ways. He's trying to get them and then us to understand the whole point of his ministry. That he came to give his life for each one of us, for their salvation. But our human nature and what the disciples wanted, they want prosperous, right? They want to be strong, successful, influential. But Jesus has other priorities. He came to be served. He came to say his ways are not our ways. He invites us to follow him. You might even say his way is upside down compared to what we're used to. Right? Jesus turns our expectations of what the Messiah and what the Christian life is upside down. Peter questions, and Peter wants a Messiah that we want, right? A strong God, a God who heals our illness, provides ample prosperity, guarantees our security, urges our military and sports team on to victory, generally keeps us happy, healthy, and wise. That's the kind of Messiah that we want. But Jesus' Messiah is not that. Jesus came, lived as a human, suffered, and died for us. He points to a God that meets us in our vulnerability, in our suffering, in our loss. He meets us in those moments when we truly need God. When all we've worked for, when all we've hoped for, when all we strive for has fallen apart. And we realize that we really are mortal. That we can't save ourselves. That we desperately need God. And then God meets us there. It's hard for the disciples to understand the Messiah. It's hard for us to understand the Messiah because we expect different than what God shows us. God doesn't give us what we want. He gives us what we need. So we get kind of to the paradox of what Jesus is talking about. Denying myself, defying myself, to take up one's cross. What that means is simply to keep our priorities in harmony with what Jesus told us in the two great commandments. Love God and love neighbor. When we talk about denying and taking up a cross, it's not a false humility. It's not demeaning ourselves. It's to keep our priorities in line with what Jesus said. We're called upon to follow him. And this salvation is not only for the future, but for our lives now. But too often we hear that language of denying ourselves and cross-bearing through the lens of Weight Watchers. Right? Where you have a little bit of less of the things that you really like. Don't ever indulge in the things that really make you happy. Cut the enjoyment calories out wherever you can. But that's not what Jesus is talking about when he's talking about denying oneself. It's not this false sense of humility or demeaning ourselves or saying I'm not worthy. He says denying is to think about a life, is to think differently about life. Almost to think upside down, if you will. We think that life is something we go out and get. We earn, we buy, or we win. But life, Jesus is saying, is a lot like love. It can't be won or earned or bought. It can only be given away. And the more you give away, the more that you have. That's kind of the reverse of our thinking. Only when you're willing to give your life away for the sake of others will you really discover it. In thinking about how to fulfill the needs of others, we begin to feel and fill our own needs. That's kind of the upside down the way it works. So why would anyone choose this denying, this taking of a cross? It's because it really becomes good news for us. The unavoidable reality is that our lives are hard. They're busy. They're burdensome. We're burdened with proving ourselves to ourselves, right? We all try and live like we're not good enough. We need the bigger house, the better car, better clothes. We need to have the best post on Facebook, the most friends on Snapchat, the best pictures and stories on Instagram. We have our kids that are the best in sports and band and speech or whatever. No matter what we have, the world tells us it's not enough and we're not good enough. And that's a never-ending cycle where it's all about getting more. That's where Jesus tells us that's not what it's about. I didn't come to give you more. I came to show you how to share, how to sacrifice, how to serve. I came to die for you, and that says right there that you are good enough. Your worth isn't in anything that you have. Your worth is simply in you're a beloved child of mine. Stop trying to prove yourself in any other fashion. I had a laugh because we talk about that game of life. I've had this conversation before at my house. The question comes up, how do I get rich, Dad? I said, what do you mean? Well, what job do I need to be rich? I said, I don't know. You can pick any job you want and make yourself rich. But the point is we're thinking of, and the question comes from, I want to be rich so I can have what I want. So my question always back to those two questioners in my house would be, what more could you possibly want? And of course, a few things more. There's always something more that we want. But then I ask, what more do you need? There isn't a single thing more needed. I said, so we are already rich. I said, that is the trap that we get into. Rich becomes, what do I have compared to something else? Instead of rich in the life that I live and the love that I give. Jesus came to serve and to die. The Messiah came to serve and to die. Our question is, will we accept that life? Will we accept the giving away? Will we step with Jesus and break that cycle of acquisition and getting more and more? Will we decide to face some sideways glances, maybe some gossip, maybe even some persecution or some talking about us around town if we decide to follow Jesus' way? Are we willing to live an upside-down life? So the question is what is enough? What do I need to do? What is the steps, or what are the steps I can take? I don't know. All I know is that when we talk about denying ourselves or taking up the cross, it's not cheap. It's not some, I'll give up something for 40 days in Lent. It's the idea of reorienting our life. How are we satisfied? Are we truly giving of ourselves? Finding ways to help others. Giving away of our stuff, of our money. Finding ways to help those who don't have enough. That's where we'll meet God. And that's where God will meet us. So what is enough? A rich young ruler once asked Jesus that question. His response was everything that you have. Does that apply to us? Maybe. Maybe not. But we need to start with the question, I think, of do we say no to God more than we say yes? When it comes to attendance in church, when it comes to helping out, when it comes to giving away some of our money, our time, when it comes to increasing a little bit more of what we do each year, when it comes to buying maybe the $20,000 car instead of the $30,000 car, when it comes to church or other functions or on family, when it becomes helping neighbor or helping enemy, do we say yes to God more often, or do we say no, I can't do that right now because I'm in pursuit of this? Do we consider what we're doing enough? Am I willing to give my life to God? That's not just life on Sunday morning. That's not just life, maybe 20 minutes a weekday if we have a chance to do some devotion. That is everything. Then am I willing to take some action to show what I want to believe? If we truly want to find our lives and have lives abundant, we must give away. We must find ways to serve. We must break the cycle of complete always acquisition and always more. That is the good news that Jesus gives us. That Jesus knows that it's about receiving, it's about giving. And in the end, we receive so much more. So are we willing to say yes to God more often than we say no? That is the challenge to us this morning. Amen.